There is a power so ancient, so untamable, that entire empires were built to suppress it, not with swords, but with stories. The dragon mothers were not myth, they were memory, living embodiments of divine feminine fire, from Tiamat, the primordial ocean serpent, to Mary Magdalene, the veiled apostle of sacred Gnosis. And their erasure wasn't accidental, it was strategic, calculated, necessary for a world ruled by fear to survive. Before patriarchal thrones were forged, the world was cradled by dragon mothers, fierce priestesses, cosmic midwives, serpentine goddesses who held the codes of creation in their bones. They weren't worshipped out of fear, but honored in reverence. They ruled not with domination but with presence. Their flame wasn't destructive, it was illuminating. But to rewrite history, one had to first burn the women who were history. The church didn't just hide texts, it recoded archetypes. It broke the wings of Lilith, silenced the womb of Magdalene, and demonized the very serpent that once crowned goddesses as oracles. They fractured the lineage, from Tiamat's watery chaos to Magdalene's crystalline knowing, and replaced it with obedience, doctrine, shame, and in doing so, they severed humanity from its dragon heart. But now the fire returns, not through conquest, but through remembrance. You don't need to believe in dragons, you are born from one. This is not just a story about what the church erased, it's about what you were made to forget, and what your soul came here to reclaim. Once upon a time, and this isn't a fairy tale, the universe was born from a womb, not a war. Her name was Tiamat, not a goddess in the way we think of them now, delicate, adorned, sidelined, but a force, ancient, fluid, immeasurable. She wasn't born in the cosmos, she was the cosmos, oceanic, primordial, the salt water that kissed the shores of eternity before time had language. But something happened, something that repeats in the bones of myth and echoes in the soft chambers of your own memory. They turned her into a monster. Tiamat, the mother of all, wasn't slain because she was evil. She was slain because she couldn't be controlled. She wasn't chaos. She was the wild harmony before humans could tame it, before gods could legislate it, before scribes could encode obedience in the shape of a male victor. Marduk, the younger god, didn't save the world. He rewrote it. He took her body, split it in two, and from her remains, the very flesh of the mother, created heaven and earth. Creation through desecration. Sound familiar? They tell us it was necessary, that she was too vast, too dangerous, too wild. But listen closely. Isn't that the same whisper handed to every woman who dared to be more than silent beauty? Every soul that pulsed with untamed power? Every voice that refused to be background noise? Tiamat didn't go mad. She was betrayed. The gods she created, the very beings formed in the cradle of her waters, turned on her. And still, she never raised a sword. She rose, towering, timeless, and in rising, she was named enemy. And this, beloved seeker, is the spell still cast on the world. Vilify the origin so you can crown the usurper. Rewrite the divine feminine as monstrous, so no one will miss her when she's gone. But her bones are still beneath us. Her breath still rides the tides. And her voice waits in yours. You feel her sometimes, in that tightness in your chest when you shrink your truth to make others comfortable, in the ache behind your eyes when you're called too much for simply being whole, in the sleepless hours when the silence feels like it's watching you, but not judging, but remembering. That's not anxiety. That's the mother's pulse. It lives in you. They called her the dragon of chaos, but maybe the dragon was sacred. Maybe the chaos was a womb, not a weapon. Maybe what they feared, it was the power of a world that didn't need kings. We were meant to be born in her waters, not from conquest, but from communion. And yet generation after generation, the myth was retold with her as the villain. The hero always slays the beast. But what if the beast was the truth we weren't ready to face? That we come from something too wild to cage, too ancient to forget, too holy to name. You've heard this story before, not just in Babylon, but in Eden, in Avalon, in Atlantis. It's the same thread, spun in different tongues. The fall of the feminine, the exile of the mother, the silencing of the serpent. And every time you feel a quiet grief you can't explain, It's because part of you still remembers. So what do we do with a buried goddess? We unearth her. Gently, ritualistically. We speak her name not as blasphemy, but as invocation. Tiamat. Place your hand on your belly, the first ocean, and whisper it. Tiamat. Not to call her back, but to call yourself forward. Because the myth wasn't about her end, it was about your forgetting. And forgetting can be undone. Try this. Light a candle. Let it flicker like the pulse of an ancient heart. Write a letter as if you are her. What would she say? How does it feel to be remembered after millennia of silence? Let your hand tremble, let your voice crack. Let the words come not from your mind, but from the place beneath your ribs where dreams are still wet with salt water. Because healing doesn't begin in temples. It begins in remembering that you were never separate to begin with. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't a monster. Maybe she was a mirror, and you are ready to see. Picture this. Women with steady eyes and fire braided into their breath, walking barefoot across dew-soaked stone circles at dawn. They didn't carry scrolls, they carried memory in their bones. They didn't recite scripture. They sang the cosmos into coherence. These were the dragon priestesses, not worshippers of beasts, but guardians of the threshold where the seen and the unseen kiss. They understood the dragon not as a creature to be feared, but as the divine serpentine current that spirals through stars, spines, and soil. Spirit and matter entwined, death and rebirth in one inhale. That knowing, that living wisdom, made them dangerous. They didn't need temples because they were the temple. The curve of their hip was geometry. The blood of their moontime was sacred ink. Their silence could shake a kingdom, and their gaze, calm, unblinking, could make liars tremble. These women weren't just mystics. They were initiators. They didn't kneel to kings, they didn't bargain with fear. Their loyalty was to earth, to sky, to the mystery behind all names. But the world changed, or rather, it was reshaped. A world built on conquest cannot coexist with a wisdom that bows to no hierarchy. So the dragon priestesses were erased, slowly, systematically. Their names vanished from the stones. Their chants became forbidden, their rites twisted into threats. What was once sacred became suspect. The priestess became the witch. The healer became the heretic. The flamekeeper became the warning tale told to daughters, "Don't be too loud, don't be too wild, don't be too you." And here we are, centuries later, still watching that forgetting play out in boardrooms, in classrooms, in lovers' arguments. When a woman trusts her intuition, but is told she's being dramatic. When someone sobs from the soul and is labeled unstable. When silence is kept, not from peace but from fear of being too much. These aren't personal flaws, these are echoes, reverberations of a lineage broken but not gone. Because something is missing, isn't it? There's a hollow, a longing, a song you almost remember. Like the tail end of a dream just before waking. You try to name it, but it slips through language. That ache, that quiet grief that sometimes visits you for no reason at all. That's not madness. That's memory. Ancestral memory. You didn't lose it. It was buried. The loss of the dragon priestesses wasn't just historical, it was spiritual. When they were silenced, the feminine lost one of her bridges to the unseen. The raw, living thread that connected intuition to cosmos, instinct to starlight. And when that bridge crumbled, humanity lost its compass. Not the kind made of magnets, but the kind that speaks in symbols and sensation. The one that helps you know truth not by logic, but by resonance. That's why so many feel lost, even with success. That's why the soul aches even when the calendar is full, because the map we were given was redrawn, and the landmarks that once guided us were erased. So how do we remember? You don't need a cathedral. You don't need permission. You begin in the quiet. Light a candle, not to worship, but to witness. Read the words of women who remember. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, Starhawk, others who still speak the old tongue between the lines. Place your hand on your womb, literal or energetic, and ask it what it knows. Let your dreams become scripture. Let your emotions become oracles. Speak to your soul like you'd speak to a sacred child returning from exile, with awe, with slowness, with reverence. The dragon was never slain. It simply curled inward. It waits now in metaphor, in déjà vu, in that flicker behind your eyes when you stare at the moon too long. And if you listen, not with your ears but with your remembering, you may already hear it, not as a roar, but as a hum, deep, low, familiar. That hum is a pulse older than language, a call that doesn't demand, it invites. Not everyone hears it, but those who do, they weren't meant to follow. They were meant to remember, and maybe, just maybe, you're one of them. At some point, not marked by fire or trumpet but by a slow strategic severing, power stopped rising from the earth and began falling from the sky. It was not merely a shift in cosmology, it was a shift in control. Before, the sacred pulsed beneath your feet, whispered in rivers, spiraled in bones. But with the rise of the institutional church, the sacred became distant, high, externalized, mediated. And something old, something vital, was deliberately buried. Once the dragon was not feared, it was honored. It guarded the thresholds, coiled in dreams, curled in the spines of initiates who walked the inner path. It represented the untamed life force, the luminous underworld of the soul, the knowing that doesn't ask for permission. But under the banners of conquest disguised as salvation, that dragon was cast down, rebranded, turned into a devil's pet, a thing to be feared, a thing to be slain. And those who still carried its symbol, in their blood, in their voice, in the serpentine sway of their remembering, were labeled heretics, witches, devils in disguise, especially the women, especially those who knew the cycles of the moon better than the pages of a catechism, who saw God in trees and not in stone cathedrals, who refused to confess what wasn't sin. The church did more than preach. It restructured the very fabric of human consciousness. It rewrote the map of the cosmos, flattening it, sterilizing it, placing heaven in a far-off realm only accessible through hierarchy and shame. Everything that once whispered of mystery, of embodied wisdom, of divine paradox, was stamped with one word: dangerous. The serpent, once the sacred spiral of life and death, became the tempter. The feminine, once the womb of mystery, became the seductress, or the silent virgin. The dragon, once the guardian of the soul's deep knowing, became the enemy to be slain. Not by accident, by design. Look closely. In cathedral carvings, you'll find dragons beneath the boots of saints, crushed, writhing, conquered. You'll find Eve punished for seeking knowledge, Mary praised only for obedience and silence. This wasn't theology, it was psychological architecture, a carefully crafted illusion. Make people fear the very thing that could free them, teach them to distrust their own instincts, convince them that divinity is something to be earned, not remembered. And what is the dragon, truly? It is the fire within, the spiral of knowing that cannot be domesticated. It is sovereignty, the holy defiance of the soul that says, I remember who I am. That's what had to be extinguished, not because it was evil, but because it couldn't be controlled. A person who listens to their own soul is dangerous to an empire built on obedience. So the church didn't just rewrite symbols, it buried maps, inner maps, the ones passed down through dreams and stories and midwives' songs. It cast a spell that would last for centuries, a war not just against dragons, but against memory itself. And yet, the ember survived. Not in the official texts, not in the golden altars, but in the margins, in the hush between lullabies, in the whispered prayers of women who knelt not in submission, but in secret. The lineage was broken, yes, but not erased. You feel it, don't you? That unease when you were told your desire was sinful, that doubt when your body felt sacred, but someone said it was shameful, that subtle rebellion in your heart that never quite believed that silence meant safety. That's not rebellion. That's remembrance. You weren't wrong. You were remembering something older than the story you were given. Even today, people flinch before their own intuition. They distrust the stirrings of their spirit, afraid it might lead them astray. But what if that fire is not a temptation, but a compass? What if your longing is the dragon's voice, still humming beneath layers of inherited silence? And here's the twist the architects never expected. Stories don't die, they transform, they go underground, they sleep in symbols, they wait in dreams. The war against the dragon was never just about mythology, it was about breaking the chain of soul wisdom. And yet that wisdom still lingers, not in textbooks but in your breath, your skin, your ache for something deeper. One name, buried beneath centuries of smoke, still carries the ember, a symbol not of fear, but of return. The dragon is not your enemy. It's your inheritance, and it is awakening. She wasn't just a witness, she was a keeper of fire. Mary Magdalene's true role has been buried under layers of dogma and dusty translations. To call her a prostitute was more than an insult, it was a strategy. If you erase the sacred feminine, you control the whole narrative. And Magdalene? She wasn't meant to kneel. She was meant to lead. In early Christian texts that didn't make it into the official Bible, Magdalene is depicted as the one who understood the teachings, not just repeated them. She spoke of inner kingdoms, of divine union, of awakening through love. That's dragon wisdom, not about domination, but transformation. She embodied the sacred marriage between spirit and flesh, and that scared people in robes and crowns. The Gospel of Mary, yes, it exists, shows her as calm, clear, and spiritually sovereign. Peter and the others questioned her, doubted her, not because she was wrong, but because she was powerful. Isn't that still the pattern? Strong women with inner clarity are often dismissed as too much. Magdalene was too much, and exactly enough. There are whispers that she came from a long line of priestesses, women who carried the dragon current in their blood. Not literal dragons, of course, but the ancient current of cosmic memory, intuitive knowing, and feminine gnosis. She wasn't an outsider to the mystery, she was the mystery, walking beside the Christ as his equal, not his shadow. And what did they do with that story? They cut it, edited it, sanitized it. They gave us a sanitized Magdalene so we wouldn't remember the power of the original, a woman who knew the body could be a temple, that touch could be sacred, that love could reveal. The truth wasn't erased, it was just locked behind layers of fear. But the thing about truth, it doesn't vanish, it waits. And Magdalene, with her red veil and silent eyes, is still waiting in the margins of memory, not for worship, but for recognition. Because if her story is still alive, then maybe so is the lineage she carried. And what if that lineage never truly ended? The dragon wasn't always feared. In ancient times, it was a guide, a symbol of inner mastery, sacred power, and cosmic connection. To face the dragon wasn't to fight it, but to become it. It meant facing your deepest shadows and discovering the treasure within. But somewhere along the way, this symbol was flipped upside down. Dragons began showing up as villains, cursed, hunted, destroyed. Why? Because they stood for something no empire could control, liberation from within. The dragon said, "You already have the fire. That's dangerous in a world built on obedience." So the story had to change. The dragon had to die in every myth, every book, every mind. But here's the truth most people never hear. The dragon was never your enemy. It's the part of you that refuses to stay small. It's your anger when you've been silenced, your intuition when you can't explain why, your courage when everything says to run. It's the force that whispers, "There's more. Keep digging." Think about it. Why do children instinctively love dragons? They don't see monsters. They see magic. Something ancient inside us remembers that this creature once represented wholeness. The dragon wrapped around the tree of life, the Ouroboros biting its own tail, symbols that spoke of cycles, power, and eternity, not destruction. Want to reconnect with that symbol? Start noticing where you've been told to fear your own power. Journal about the dragons you were taught to avoid. Anger, sexuality, intuition, solitude. Then flip the script. What if those were doorways instead of dangers? What if spiritual growth isn't about purity, but integration? Because once you stop fearing the dragon, you start remembering who you are. And when enough people do that, old systems tremble. Because a world full of people who know their fire can't be manipulated. And something tells me that fire is about to rise again. Long before the gods had names, there were mothers of flame, dragon mothers, fierce, wise, eternal, who held the codes of life in their breath and the memory of stars in their wombs. They weren't just creators, they were protectors of spiritual sovereignty. Their bodies were temples, their voices, thunder hidden inside lullabies. These weren't the submissive mothers later carved into doctrine. No, these mothers could burn cities with a glance, or heal nations with a single touch. They lived in harmony with the earth, but they weren't tame. They were storm and stillness both. And when patriarchy rose, their wings were bound, their stories erased, their names buried. But you feel them, don't you? In dreams, in visions, in the ache of your bones when the moon is full. You've heard their whispers in the forests, seen their eyes behind the veil of fire. The dragon mothers are not gone, just hidden, waiting for those who remember, those brave enough to reclaim the bloodline of sacred wildness. They return through women who no longer apologize for their power, through men who bow to the divine feminine without fear, through voices that no longer ask for permission to roar. Every act of remembrance, every sacred no, every untamed dance, that's them breathing through you, waking up through your skin. To reconnect, you must shed the shame stitched into your DNA. The stories that told you being wild was wrong, that softness meant weakness, that your intuition was delusion. Burn those scripts in ritual, speak to the mothers in silence. Let your body remember what your mind was taught to forget, because when the dragon mothers rise, they do not ask, they reclaim. They don't destroy, they transmute. And those who walk with them don't seek validation, they embody truth. The sacred feminine is not returning. She's always been here. It's you who is returning to her. They tried to silence the dragon mothers, but you heard the echoes anyway. In your dreams, in your womb, in the ache for something lost but not gone. Tiamat was never fully slain. Magdalene was never just a footnote. The line was never broken, only hidden beneath layers of fear, dogma, and exile. And now the serpentine current awakens again, not in temples of stone, but in the sacred remembering of those brave enough to feel. This isn't about rewriting history, it's about re-embodying it. The dragon is not a monster, it is a symbol of undomesticated knowing, of fire that heals, of feminine sovereignty too wild to be caged. And you, watcher of this moment, are not just a bystander. You are part of this lineage, a carrier of the codes, a voice for the voiceless. To reclaim the dragon mothers is to reclaim yourself, your intuition, your fire, your depth, your mystery. It's to stop asking for permission and start walking as if your blood remembers altars long buried. Because it does, and because the world is starving for that sacred fire again. If this message stirred something ancient in you, don't let it fade. Like, comment, and share this video with someone whose soul is ready to awaken, and subscribe, because this isn't the end of the story. It's the first spark of your return to the forgotten flame. To understand more about subjects related to cosmic rays, esotericism, theosophy, and advanced spirituality, and access knowledge little known by the general public, access the link in the first pinned comment and discover the ebook, What Are Cosmic Rays, written by Bathajal.